What are we? What is life all about? Is there meaning to it all? The answers to these questions depend heavily on what the world, and thereby we, actually are at the most fundamental level. So what is this world we find ourselves in? What is the fundamental nature of reality? That is what philosophers call a metaphysical question. Metaphysics is the strain of philosophy that concerns itself with precisely the fundamental structures of reality. In this video I will present the four main metaphysical positions, as well as the most important arguments supporting and challenging each of them. The four primary ways of understanding reality and thereby ourselves. Generally speaking, it comes down to how the physical world, roughly matter, and the mental world, consciousness, are understood to relate to each other. The physical and the mental, or historically, body and soul. The most widespread position today, in the Western world at least, is the view that what exists fundamentally is the physical, and consciousness is created by, or in some other way, the result of physical processes, brain processes. This is the position of metaphysical materialism, sometimes called physicalism. The physical, loosely matter, is what is fundamental. Physicalism matches the approach of the natural science as well. In its pure form, everything can ultimately be reduced to the physical and understood in terms of the physical. Ultimately, everything boils down to atoms, elementary particles, and the other things that physics deals with. So if we understand the physics beneath, we can in principle understand everything else too. The materialistic understanding has its roots in the enormous success of the natural sciences during the last 2 or 3 centuries. Through observation of the workings of the physical world, we have gained an ever better understanding of how the world works. The mythological or religious explanations of earlier times have been replaced by the insights of the natural sciences. Thus, the idea of an independently existing soul, for example, has generally been abandoned. It is the physical world that is in focus. It is that part of reality that has given us so many answers, and it makes sense that we would come to consider the physical as the most fundamental, as the only thing that exists at the most foundational level. This is the materialistic view. However, objections can be raised against this view. First, materialism cannot prove itself. That is, materialism cannot prove that materialism is true. The starting point in the materialistic understanding is the physical world, and it's then assumed that the physical is the only thing that exists. But that is an assumption. As noted, the impressive success of the natural sciences does provide a good argument for the idea that we have now understood what it is all about, the physical. Insight into the behavior of the physical world through observations of the physical is generalized to include everything that exists. And it thus seems reasonable, it is argued, to expect that in the future we will gain even greater insight following this path. But this is still an assumption about what reality is fundamentally. After all, it is not possible to determine with certainty whether something non-physical exists solely through observation of the physical. In principle, reality may well be arranged differently than the way proposed by materialism, and yet still accord with the observations of the natural sciences. If that is the case, then the assumption that the physical is the only fundamental thing that exists is wrong. The most pressing problem for materialism is to explain consciousness, mind and awareness. How can something physical, the brain, create something non-physical, consciousness? No good theories or explanations for it have been presented. The problem of consciousness has led to new paths being explored in modern philosophy. Before the advance of natural science in recent centuries, views other than the materialist one were common. And some of those have attracted increased attention during the last few decades. One such view is dualism. Dualism, or more precisely substance dualism, holds that there are two independently existing substances or fundamental types of things in the world. There's the physical and the mental, and each exists independently of the other. So in a materialist understanding, it is the physical that exists fundamentally, and then the mental is somehow created by it, or at least is caused by it. But according to the substance dualistic view, they both possess fundamental existence. Both consciousness and the physical, traditionally conceived as soul and body, exist independently of each other. Descartes, for example, is a well-known proponent of a version of substance dualism. Traditionally, the main philosophical problem for the substance dualist view is the so-called interaction problem. How can these two things, which are so different, possibly interact? How can they influence each other? It seems that something physical could only be affected by something that is also physical. It could not be affected by something mental, something non-physical. Physical effects have physical causes. And the other way around as well. How would something that is physical be able to affect something that is not physical? So the interaction between the mental and the physical is very difficult to explain. In addition, substance dualism doesn't really have direct empirical support, meaning that there are no direct observations that support the existence of some kind of independent consciousness or mental substance. It seems that everything that is observed about the behavior of the physical world follows the laws of nature. There's apparently no deviation from this, which would be the case if some physical effects or events had not a physical cause, but a mental one. So substance dualism faces a big problem, the interaction problem. And it is indeed not a position that is much defended today, although proponents can be found. Partly as a response to Descartes' substance dualism, now we are back in the 16th and 17th centuries, another noteworthy philosopher, Spinoza, presented a different view called the double aspect theory. Spinoza says that the physical and the mental are not two different or independently existing things, as dualism holds, nor is it the case that it is only the physical that is the primary thing, as materialism holds. In reality, Spinoza holds the two things are aspects of the same underlying thing or substance. There is fundamentally just this one substance or thing. So if I look at my hand here, it looks different if I look at it like this and I look at it like that. But it's still the same one hand. So fundamentally, Spinoza says reality, the world in its entirety, everything that exists, consists of only a single substance. He calls it the substance or nature of God. To illustrate, he uses the example of a coin like I used my hand before. If you look at it from one side, it looks a certain way, and if you look at it from the other side, it looks different. So the physical and the mental are two sides of the same thing, two aspects of the same underlying substance. Hence the name dual aspect theory. The single thing that reality consists of possesses the aspects of both the physical and the mental. This is a somewhat curious idea perhaps, and there are some obvious objections to it. What kind of thing is this underlying substance that it can be both the mental and the physical at the same time. It is like something having to simultaneously be a square and a circle, it has been argued. It is quite obscure and it seems completely incomprehensible what that thing or substance could be. Another objection is that if everything has both physical and conscious aspects at the same time, then it means that there is a mental aspect to every physical object, that everything physical also possesses consciousness. So somehow this bookcase or elements it consists of has a mental side in some form. That seems rather difficult to imagine. This is the so-called panpsychistic position, the idea that consciousness is present everywhere in the physical world. More modern variants of panpsychism have surfaced recently, partly because it is so difficult to explain consciousness within a materialist framework. That is, to explain how the physical can generate consciousness. But if there's something mental present in the physical at the outset, then there's no step from the physical to consciousness that has to be explained. Consciousness was already there to start with. So we have materialism and substance dualism and dual aspect theory. And then there is a fourth main position, the view of metaphysical idealism. According to the materialist understanding, it is the physical that exists fundamentally, and consciousness is, as it were, created by it. Idealism is the reverse position. On this view, what exists fundamentally is consciousness. We know with certainty that consciousness exists. I know I possess consciousness, 100% sure. I know I experience. What I experience then might be something physical. But in the idealist view, it is consciousness that exists fundamentally, with the physical being merely experiences, so to speak. That is, the physical does not exist in itself. It is in some way created by the mental, or it is an appearance of something manifesting in consciousness. The physical doesn't exist independently on this view, as we usually assume it does. That is a somewhat curious thought. There are various strands of idealism. Kant claimed in the 18th century that the only thing we have access to is our world of experience, not external reality. So reality as it is in itself, das Ding an sich, is in principle beyond our reach. We cannot know anything about it as it ultimately is. This position doesn't really tell us what reality actually is. It's more of an epistemological angle on it. What can we know about reality rather than the metaphysical question of what reality is? Two other idealistic positions concern themselves with the actual basic nature of reality. One is a position that has been termed subjective idealism, presented by Berkeley also in the 18th century. Simply put, he claimed that the physical does not have actual existence, doesn't exist in itself. What appear to us as physical objects are in fact just experiences. So the only things that really exist are those beings that are doing the experiencing. Everything else is simply content in our experiences, perceptions. A rather strange view that the bookshelf here is not an independently existing object, that it exists only in my mind. This completely contradicts our ordinary understanding of the world. There are deeper problems with this position as well. Take this bookshelf here. When I look at it, it exists as a perception, an experience of the bookshelf. If I close my eyes, I no longer experience it. Is it then just gone? It simply does not exist anymore. I then open my eyes, then it all of a sudden is there again. It springs back into existence. It's a rather strange notion. If we are to maintain complete consistency here, it also leads to what is called solipsism. If the bookshelf doesn't really exist independently of my mind, then other people do not exist independently either. At least it is not clear how I could know whether they exist. Just like the bookshelf, other people could exist only in my world of experience. Does this mean I'm the only existent person in all of the world? This is such an absurd conclusion. It is argued that it is unacceptable for us to subscribe to subjective idealism. And there are few philosophers defending it, at least in such an extreme form today. The other main variant of metaphysical idealism is so-called absolute idealism. This view can be traced back to the early 19th century German philosopher Hegel, and then through the British idealists Hegel influenced over the next century. According to this position, what exists, a bit like Spinoza, is in fact one all-encompassing unity, the absolute. Everything, including all of us, are a part of it. We are all, in reality, part of one unified whole. I think I am something different from that bookcase, or I am something different from other people, and within my world of experience, that is true enough. But ultimately, we are all part of the same whole. We just don't experience it that way. So it is idealism in the sense that our world of experience is generated in some way by something mental, and that which fundamentally exists is some form of consciousness, a somehow all-encompassing consciousness. The problem that arises for this view is usually called the problem of the one and the many, unity and diversity. That is, if reality is one, a single thing, a coherent whole, how can it be that we seem to experience many individual things? In particular, I believe that I myself am an individual subject who experiences reality and other people, and that the other people I encounter are other individual subjects. How do we reconcile that with the claim that everything is literally a unity, one? So, here we have the four main metaphysical positions, the main views on how reality is fundamentally structured. The materialist view, which is the most widespread today, and which rests primarily on the great progress of the natural sciences. The physical is what reality fundamentally is. The view of substance dualism, according to which two different types of things, the physical and the mental, exist independently of each other. The double aspect theory, which claims that these two are actually two sides or aspects of the same underlying thing. And lastly, idealism, which claims that what exists fundamentally is consciousness, and that the apparently independently existing physical is simply something experienced by conscious minds. Which of these views one adopts has significant impact on a wide range of topics, not least existential questions. For example, the question of life after death. If one has a materialist understanding, the possibility of a continued existence after physical death is rejected right away. A substance dualist understanding or an idealist understanding would, on the other hand, open up the possibility of such continued existence. So, a clear connection between the metaphysical question of the nature of reality to existentially very relevant questions. The way you understand reality fundamentally, even if it seems to be a merely abstract or theoretical question, is very relevant to how you see yourself and your life and the meaning of your life. What do I want to do with this life I find myself in? What is it all about, if it's about anything? It's clear that each of these four positions face key problems they have a hard time solving. A philosopher has formulated it like this. When you look at the soul-body problem, how do the physical and consciousness relate to each other, then materialism is not plausible, since it cannot explain how consciousness arises. Substance dualism is not plausible, since it cannot explain how the two things should be able to interact. Dual aspect theory is not plausible because consciousness and the physical must then be the same, but that seems incomprehensible. And idealism is not plausible because if it is subjective idealism, it leads to the idea that I am the only one who exists. And if it is absolute idealism, it leads to the problem of how everything could be a unity if at the same time we accept that we exist as individuals. And thus, he continues, none of the four positions are plausible, but one of them must be the right one. Reality is arranged in some way or other after all, and this increases the plausibility of each of them. So it is an open question. How is reality actually arranged? What is the fundamental nature of reality? There are arguments for and against each of the four positions. Worth noting is that immediate acceptance of the materialist view on reality is perhaps less well-founded than what is often assumed. The fundamental nature of reality is indeed an open question. Thanks.